What's so important about kindergarten, you ask? Well, you've come to the right place. Once an individual turns 4 or 5, they embark on a journey at school, beginning in September. And this lasts a minimum of 14 years. We call this journey an education, and it all begins with kindergarten. The Ministry of Education has provided the guide called the Kindergarten Program. It describes kindergarten on the second page as a 2-year program for 4 and 5-year-olds. And this is a part of an initiative to create a cohesive, coordinated system for early years programs and services across the province. They further state on page 8 that the purpose of the program is to establish a strong foundation for learning in the early years, and to do so in a safe and caring, play-based environment. And that promotes physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of all children. There are 3 main components of the kindergarten classroom that I will talk about today. The first component is the learner. I'm going to begin discussing the learner as kindergarten takes a student-based approach, which we'll talk about later. Second, we have the teacher. Here I will discuss the teaching techniques one may see in a kindergarten classroom. This includes inquiry-based learning and play-based learning. And finally, the third component, which is the environment, which is also known as the third teacher. I will dive a little deeper on this component, including the ways I would create my own kindergarten classroom and the reason behind it. According to the kindergarten program, play is recognized as a child's right, and it is essential to the child's optimal development. Kindergarten is important for the education journey, as the students master their make-believe play. Make-believe play gives a unique opportunity to expand their vocabulary, be creative, and problem solve. However, it takes time for students to master all critical elements of play. According to the National Association for Education of Young Children, these critical elements include planning, roles, props, extended time frames, language, and scenario. This is also known as propels. There are 5 stages to master each of these elements of play. Teachers use scaffolding, or in other words, the teachers build upon previous knowledge and provide opportunities to advance the students' maturity of play. These are the 5 stages in which teachers build upon or scaffold. When discussing the learner, we are going to put them in the center. Kindergarten students are full of curiosity and wonder. According to the kindergarten program, again on page 8, we must remember that kindergarten students are capable and competent learners, full of potential and ready to take ownership of their learning. Because of children's innate desire to learn, the kinder program is based upon an inquiry-based model. According to Think Kindergarten, teachers play an important role in inquiry-based learning, especially compared to the traditional ways. The educator is a co-learner along with the student and is only there to help guide them along their learning journey. The displayed diagram is the inquiry model from the Think Kindergarten article. Next, I will describe the relationship between the teacher and the learner while they go through an inquiry-based learning process together. Here in the kindergarten classroom environment, you will see the inquiry-based learning process. First, you will see the child's initial engagement, where they are wondering and playing. Here, the student is raising questions about their experience, and the teacher is just observing and listening. Next, the child begins the exploration part of the process. This is where the learner is exploring what is happening around them and observing their findings. From this, they use their senses to observe and ask more questions. The teacher should ask thoughtful questions and encourage students to continue. Then comes the investigation part of the inquiry process, where students gather, plan, compare, sort, and describe their findings. They begin to draw conclusions. The teacher in this stage is strategically providing materials and questions to enrich the student's learning, while also clarifying and expanding. The teacher may have to model and example this stage. Finally, the communication process begins where the students are sharing their findings. This is where students will share, discuss, and listen about everybody's ideas. The teacher should listen and help make connections between prior knowledge and new discoveries, as stated from the Think Kindergarten article. We have now discussed the learner and the teacher and their intertwined relationship. This relationship is so important to the kindergarten classroom. However, we have yet to mention on how the environment as a third teacher also has a large impact on the learner's beginning educational journey. Let's check out this classroom. It's as basic as it gets. How can I make this classroom as best as possible for my students? Let's begin on an extreme makeover Reggio Emilia edition. First, I'm going to add in aesthetics, or the detail put into the creation of the space. I think I'm going to add some light to my classroom, natural and electrical, possibly to have a light and dark room in a quiet space. Next, I am going to implement active learning in my classroom, hopefully provoking thoughtful observations and inquiry-based learning. I will possibly add in some flowers that smell lovely and some different feeling carpet fabrics. After, I most definitely need a collaboration area, which will provide an opportunity for my students to work together and with myself. Let's use this active learning carpet to create a sharing station. You can also see a lot of transparency in my classroom, and that includes the large windows for natural lighting as well as the mirror on the wall. I will also encourage bringing that outdoors in by bringing more plants and possibly art supplies so that I can make relationships with the outdoors and the inside activities. However, everything in my classroom needs to be flexible so that I can move and rotate my objects, so it is an always changing environment for my students to continue their learning in diverse ways. Finally, I will make sure my room is open to change and is responsive to children, parents, and community, just as Reggio Emilia would suggest. Perhaps a garden to create with the students and to share with the community. If you are familiar with the Reggio Emilia approach to the classroom, you may have recognized that I implemented each of his 8 principles of creating an environment that acts as the third teacher. This includes aesthetics, active learning, collaboration, transparency, bringing the outdoors in, flexibility, relationships, and reciprocity. The environment as the third teacher is such an important part of kindergarten as it assists the learner and the teacher in the play and inquiry-based learning that takes place. As you may have noticed, the first 2 years of kindergarten are nothing like the rest of a student's educational journey. Kindergarten specifically uses the inquiry and play-based learning techniques to provide students with a toolbox that they will use for the rest of their lives. In conclusion, the important tools the learner will take with them are all covered in the 4 frames of the kindergarten program. This includes belonging and contributing, self-regulation and well-being, demonstrating literacy and mathematic behaviors, as well as problem-solving and innovation. Each of these frames will be used in their futures, and that is why kindergarten is so important. The next slide includes the references. I would just like to mention that the Think Kindergarten 2017 book, information on the inquiry-based model, can be found in the Week 2 lecture in the class EDUC 4079. Also, the information pertaining to Reggio Emilia can be found in Kelsey Robson's workshop on exploring 8 principles of creating an environment that acts as the third teacher.